Case 1. Zan Floyd, mass shooter. Las Vegas, Nevada, June 3, 1999. A young man's confession would send shockwaves through law enforcement when he explained his motivation with chilling simplicity. He'd always wondered what taking a life would feel like. This wasn't passion or desperation speaking. It was a cold fulfillment of a fantasy he'd harbored since boyhood. Zan Michael Floyd entered this world in Colorado in 1975, immediately abandoned by his biological father. His formative years were plagued by household instability and rampant substance abuse. By 16, Floyd was regularly consuming marijuana and methamphetamine while navigating an abusive stepfather and struggling academically. Seeking structure at 18, he enlisted in the United States Marine Corps. Initially, military life provided direction. Fellow Marines praised his excellence as a combat training instructor, though they noted he faltered when left unsupervised. Persistent alcohol issues plagued his service, leading to an honorable discharge in July 1998 at Lance Corporal rank. The Marines made clear he wouldn't be welcomed back. Transitioning to civilian life in Las Vegas, Floyd worked security and part-time bouncing at a local tavern. By late spring 1999, his world had collapsed. His close cousin perished in a drunk driving incident. He lost his security position. Days afterward, eviction forced him into a guest house on his parents' property, mere blocks from Vegas Verde Elementary School. He'd hit rock bottom and was about to drag innocent people down with him. In the pre-dawn hours of June 3, 1999, Floyd contacted an alcohol service. Around 3:30 a.m., a 20-year-old woman arrived at his residence. Rather than the expected transaction, Floyd aimed a 12-gauge shotgun at her, forcing her to endure hours of violence. He told her she was fulfilling his twisted fantasy. Eventually donning Marine Corps camouflage, he announced his intention to eliminate the first people he encountered. He gave the woman 60 seconds to flee before he'd shoot. She escaped to safety. Around 5 o'clock that morning, Floyd concealed the shotgun beneath a bathrobe, stuffed his pockets with shells, and began the 15-minute walk to the Albertsons grocery store on West Sahara Avenue. Surveillance cameras would document every moment of what prosecutors termed the worst massacre in Las Vegas history. At 5:15 a.m., Floyd discarded his bathrobe and entered the supermarket. His initial victim was 40-year-old Thomas Donnell, who had a developmental disability and was organizing shopping carts near the entrance. Floyd shot him in the back without warning. Moving through the store like a predator, Floyd next encountered 41-year-old Chuck Leos, the frozen food manager who'd just celebrated his first wedding anniversary. Floyd shot him in the neck and face. 31-year-old Dennis Sargent, a night supervisor and father to a 6-year-old son, was struck in the chest as Floyd methodically stalked through the aisles. In the produce section, 23-year-old stock clerk Zachary Emeniga heard the blast and attempted to flee. Floyd pursued him, firing twice, hitting him in the upper chest and puncturing his lung. Emeniga collapsed, and Floyd stood over him, whispering, "Yeah, you're dead." But Emeniga wasn't. He played deceased, lying motionless while Floyd continued his rampage. Other employees scrambled for safety, hiding in walk-in coolers, compressor rooms, and offices. From an upstairs window, bookkeeper Christine Goldsworthy called 911, remaining on the line as horror unfolded below. In the back of the bakery, 60-year-old Lucia Tarantino, a grandmother, encountered Floyd. Witnesses later testified that Floyd sounded almost cheerful when greeting her. Tarantino begged for her life. Floyd shot her in the top of the head at point-blank range. The entire massacre lasted 5 minutes. By 5:20, Floyd walked out to find police already surrounding the building. He threatened to take his own life, pointing the shotgun at his chest and head, but couldn't summon the courage to pull the trigger. Officers talked him down, and Floyd kicked the weapon away. When questioned, Floyd's confession was disturbingly candid. He told detectives he'd always wanted to know what taking a life felt like, ever since childhood watching war movies. There was no deeper motive, no specific grievance against his victims. They simply existed in the wrong place when Floyd decided to act on his lifelong curiosity. His 3-day trial in July 2000 was swift. The defense didn't dispute the facts. Security footage, survivor testimony, and Floyd's recorded confession left no doubt. Prosecutors presented evidence of his troubled background, including expert testimony suggesting he suffered from fetal alcohol spectrum disorder due to his mother's drinking during pregnancy. The jury heard about his violent upbringing, service-related post-traumatic stress from time at Guantanamo Bay, and struggles with substance abuse. None of it mattered. On July 13, 2000, after deliberating just over 2 hours, jurors convicted him of 4 counts of first-degree murder with use of a deadly weapon, attempted murder, and multiple counts related to the early assault. The jury recommended death for each murder count. The court added maximum consecutive sentences for his other convictions and ordered over $180,000 in restitution. Floyd has been on death row for 25 years. He has exhausted countless appeals through state and federal courts, all denied. In 2021, prosecutors sought an execution warrant, scheduling his death for July 26, but federal court stayed the execution, requiring more time to review Nevada's never-before-used lethal injection protocol. By February 2022, the drugs intended for his execution had expired, indefinitely delaying any execution date. Now 49 years old and housed at High Desert State Prison, Floyd continues fighting his sentence. Nevada hasn't executed anyone since 2006, and ongoing legal challenges mean Floyd may spend decades more waiting a death that may never come. For the families of Thomas Donnell, Chuck Leos, Dennis Sargent, and Lusa Tarantino, that wait continues to deny closure. Case 2, Ahmad Harris, Las Vegas strip shooter. Las Vegas, Nevada, February 21, 2013. The Las Vegas Strip has witnessed its share of violence, but few incidents have been as spectacular and deadly as what unfolded in the pre-dawn hours of February 21, 2013. What started as a verbal confrontation would end in a scene witnesses described as something from an action movie, a high-speed chase, gunfire, and a fireball that lit up the world's most famous boulevard. Ahmad Omar Farouk Harris grew up in Brooklyn, New York, but by his mid-20s had established himself in the fast-paced worlds of Miami and Atlanta. He portrayed himself as a high-rolling pimp, flashing $100 bills and posting videos online showing rooms full of women working for him. He bragged about owning luxury vehicles, hosting $1,000 bikini contests on yachts in the Atlantic, and living the kind of lifestyle that attracted both admiration and trouble. His social media presence showcased an ego-driven personality obsessed with status, wealth, and power. But Harris's flashy exterior masked a violent criminal history. In 2004, he'd been convicted in South Carolina of possessing a stolen pistol with intent to sell. Years later in Las Vegas, he'd be convicted of a brutal 2010 incident in which he abducted and assaulted an 18-year-old woman, ultimately receiving 16 years to life in prison. That conviction would come after the events that would define his legacy. Kenneth Wayne Cherry Jr. called himself Kenny Clutch. The 27-year-old Oakland native had moved to Las Vegas to pursue his rap career. His music videos showed him driving his gray Maserati down the strip, boasting that he paid $120,000 for it. In one video titled Stay Scheming, he rapped about hotels along Las Vegas Boulevard. But family members insisted the gangster persona was an act. His attorney described him as simply a good kid trying to make it and be a good father to his 2 children. His aunt called him a kind soul who'd attended Catholic schools in Berkeley and Oakland. Around 4:20 a.m. on February 21, 2013, both men were leaving the Aria Resort on Las Vegas Boulevard. Witnesses reported an argument in the valet area. The disagreement was apparently minor, but to Harris's massive ego, it was enough. Surveillance cameras would capture what happened next. The 2 vehicles jockeyed for position on the neon-lit boulevard. Harris's black Range Rover with tinted windows and custom rims pulled alongside Cherry's Maserati in a tire-squealing chase between stoplights. Multiple angles of security footage captured the sound and flash of gunfire erupting from the Range Rover. At least 5 shots were fired into the sports car. 1 bullet tore through Cherry's vital organs. A passenger in the Maserati suffered a minor gunshot wound to his arm. Mortally wounded, Cherry's Maserati accelerated through a red light at the intersection of Flamingo Road and Las Vegas Boulevard, one of the busiest corners in the city. The sports car slammed into a taxi at full speed. The impact was catastrophic. The taxi erupted in flames, creating an explosion that witnesses would never forget. Pre-dawn joggers stopped to photograph the massive fireball. Black smoke billowed into the sky. Popping sounds from the fire echoed through the normally bustling tourist corridor. Inside the burning taxi were two innocent people who'd simply been in the wrong place. 62-year-old Michael Baldon had moved from Michigan to Las Vegas the previous year to help care for his aging mother. He'd immediately gotten a job as a taxi driver and loved it, coming home each night to tell his sister stories about the interesting people he'd picked up. He was a single father who had raised his son alone and had recently become a grandfather, with his grandson named after him. His passenger that night was 48-year-old Sandra Sutton Wasmond, a businesswoman and mother of 3 visiting from Maple Valley, Washington. Neither survived. Cherry died at University Medical Center. The chain reaction crash involved 6 vehicles total and injured at least 6 additional people. The intersection remained closed for an entire day. The black Range Rover sped away into the night. Within hours, police identified Harris as their suspect and launched a massive manhunt. Authorities in Nevada, Utah, Arizona, and California were put on alert. 2 days later, investigators located the abandoned Range Rover at the Meridian apartment complex on Flamingo Road, just blocks from the Strip. Evidence was impounded, but Harris had vanished. For a week, he remained at large. Then on February 28th, authorities tracked him to an apartment in Studio City, Los Angeles. A joint law enforcement team, including Las Vegas police and the FBI, made the arrest. Captain Chris Jones later revealed they'd received intelligence that Harris was contemplating an escape attempt during his transport back to Nevada. They took no chances, deploying heavy security for the overnight transfer, but the journey proved uneventful. Harris's trial began in October 2015. No one disputed he was a shooter. Video evidence was overwhelming. Prosecutors painted him as so driven by ego that mere words in the LA area were sufficient to spark a murderous rampage. Defense attorneys argued self-defense, claiming Harris believed Cherry was shooting at him first. But police found no weapon in the wrecked Maserati and no bullet holes in the Range Rover. The jury heard testimony about Harris's lifestyle, including a recorded jail call where he discussed paying $20,000 for an armed assault team to break him out during his transfer from Los Angeles. They learned he'd been convicted earlier that year of bribing a Nevada prison guard to smuggle cell phones, take out chicken, and vodka to him behind bars. But they never heard Harris testify. He remained silent throughout. On October 26, 2015, after hearing from dozens of witnesses, the jury convicted Harris of 11 felony charges, including 3 counts of first-degree murder. During the penalty phase, Harris refused to appear in court for 3 days of testimony. Jurors found 10 aggravating factors and 0 mitigating circumstances. They recommended death. On January 4, 2016, Judge Kathleen Delaney formally imposed a sentence. Harris stood quietly, showing no reaction. Terran Baldon, Michael Bolden's brother, was the only family member present, weeping as the sentence was read. He later expressed frustration with Nevada's lengthy appeals process. "The death penalty means nothing," he said. "I think Harris should be put down." The Nevada Supreme Court upheld Harris's conviction and death sentence in January 2019, rejecting numerous appeals. In August 2020, Harris was stabbed by another inmate at Ely State Prison and placed on life support but survived. Now approaching 40, he remains on death row, where he'll likely spend decades more given Nevada's moratorium on execution since 2006. Case 3, Dwayne Kef D. Davis, Tupac Shakur case. Las Vegas, Nevada, September 7, 1996. For 27 years, one of hip-hop's most notorious mysteries remained unsolved, until the suspect himself decided to tell the world exactly what happened. September 7, 1996. Las Vegas was electric that night. Mike Tyson had just demolished Bruce Seldon in 99 seconds at the MGM Grand Garden Arena, and the city buzzed with fight fans and celebrities. Among them was 25-year-old Tupac Shakur, riding shotgun in a black BMW driven by Death Row Records CEO Suge Knight. They were headed to Club 662 for an after-party when a white Cadillac pulled alongside them at the intersection of Flamingo Road and Koval Lane. It was 11:15 p.m. 13 gunshots shattered the night. 4 struck Tupac. 6 days later, on September 13th, the world lost one of its most influential artists. The case went cold almost immediately, spawning countless theories, documentaries, and investigations that led nowhere, until a former gang member couldn't stop talking. Dwayne Keith Davis grew up in Compton, California, one of 12 siblings known on the streets as Kef D. He climbed the ranks to become a shot caller for the notorious Southside Compton Crips. By the 90s, he was running a multi-million-dollar, multi-state narcotics operation while maintaining his gang affiliations. His world revolved around territory, respect, and retribution. When his nephew Orlando Anderson got into trouble in 1996, those principles would collide with the music industry in the most devastating way possible. The trouble started earlier that night at the MGM Grand. After the Tyson fight, members of Death Row Records spotted Anderson in the hotel lobby. What happened next was captured on surveillance cameras. Tupac, Suge Knight, and their entourage attacked Anderson, kicking and punching him near the elevator banks. Hotel security broke it up, but the damage was done. Word quickly reached Kef D that his nephew had been beaten by Tupac Shakur and the Death Row crew. In the world Kef D inhabited, such disrespect demanded an immediate response. Within hours, Kef D had formulated a plan. He secured a firearm from a close associate, then gathered 3 others, his nephew Orlando Anderson, Terrence Brown, and DeAndre Smith. They climbed into a white Cadillac and began searching the Las Vegas Strip for their target. They spotted Knight's BMW idling at a red light. Kef D sat in the front passenger seat. Anderson and Smith occupied the back. According to later accounts, Kef D passed the weapon to the back seat. The Cadillac pulled alongside the BMW. Shots erupted from the rear window, 13 rounds. The white Cadillac vanished into Las Vegas traffic. Tupac Shakur clung to life for 6 agonizing days before succumbing to his injuries. The investigation hit immediate obstacles. Witnesses refused to cooperate. Suspects scattered. Orlando Anderson, the prime suspect, denied everything and was never charged. He was eliminated in an unrelated gang confrontation in 1998. Terrence Brown was taken out shortly after. DeAndre Smith met a similar fate. By the time the 20th anniversary of Tupac's demise rolled around, every suspect was deceased except Kef D, and that's when he started talking. In 2018, Kef D appeared on a Bet documentary series, calmly describing his role in Tupac's elimination. He placed himself in the white Cadillac. He discussed the planning. He referenced passing the weapon to the back seat. Media outlets clamored for more. He gave interviews to Vlad TV, A&E, USA Network, and Fox. Each time, he added details about that September night. Then in 2019, he published a memoir titled Compton Street Legend, where he laid out the entire sequence of events in his own words. He wrote about the MGM Grand beating, the retaliation plan, the white Cadillac, everything. Why would someone confess to involvement in one of America's most infamous unsolved cases? Kef D believed he had immunity. Years earlier, during federal investigations into other matters, prosecutors had granted Kef D limited immunity for his statements about Tupac. He apparently interpreted this as permanent protection, that he could discuss the case freely without consequences. He was catastrophically wrong. Las Vegas police watched his interviews. They read his book. They reopened the case in 2018 after his public admissions provided the breakthrough they needed. On July 17, 2023, a SWAT team descended on a Henderson, Nevada, home belonging to Kef D's wife. They seized computers, documents, magazines about Tupac, and a copy of his memoir. 2 months later, on the morning of September 29, 2023, exactly 27 years after the incident, officers arrested Kef D while he walked near his Henderson home. A grand jury had already indicted him on 1 count of first-degree murder with use of a deadly weapon with gang enhancement. Prosecutors described Kef D as an on-ground, on-site commander who ordered the demise of Tupac Shakur. At his arraignment on November 2, 2023, 60-year-old Kef D stood shackled in a blue jumpsuit and entered a plea of not guilty. His defense strategy immediately shifted. Those interviews and that memoir, all fabricated for entertainment and profit. His attorneys argued he made up stories because media outlets paid him substantial sums. The book was ghostwritten. The interviews were embellished. None of it was real. The problem? His own words, captured on video and in print, told an incredibly detailed story that matched investigative evidence. Kef D has remained incarcerated at the Clark County Detention Center since his September 2023 arrest. Bail was initially denied, then set at $750,000, but has never secured release. His legal troubles multiplied when, on December 23, 2024, he got into a physical altercation with another inmate while awaiting trial. 4 months later, in April 2025, a jury found him guilty of battery by prisoner and challenges to fight. He was sentenced in September 2025 to 16 to 40 months in prison with credit for time served, additional time that will run concurrent with any sentence in the murder case. His trial has been delayed repeatedly. Originally scheduled for June 2024, it was pushed to November, then February 2026, and most recently to August 10, 2026. His attorneys cite voluminous evidence requiring extensive review. By the time his trial begins, Kef D will have spent nearly 3 years behind bars. He maintains his innocence, now claiming he was 300 miles away in Los Angeles when Tupac was shot, despite his detailed confessions placing him in Las Vegas that night. His defense has hinted at alternative theories suggesting others orchestrated the attack, but has provided little concrete evidence. If convicted, Kef D faces life in prison without the possibility of parole. The charge of first-degree murder in Nevada carries mandatory sentences for gang-related incidents. At 62 years old, a conviction would likely mean he dies in custody. Kef D's case serves as a cautionary tale about the permanence of words. His belief that immunity protected his confessions proved disastrously mistaken. His own voice, his own pen, ultimately became the evidence that put him behind bars. The street code he lived by for decades: keep silent, never cooperate. He violated repeatedly for book deals and documentary fees. Now he awaits judgment for the orchestration of an attack that shocked the world 29 years ago. 3 weeks passed. On February 15, 2008, a worker discovered Brianna's remains in a vacant field in South Reno, partially covered by snow and a discarded Christmas tree. She was clothed only in socks. Near her body, investigators found 2 pairs of women's thong underwear, neither belonging to Brianna. One belonged to the friend whose apartment she'd been staying at the night she disappeared. DNA evidence on these items would prove critical. Police realized they were looking at the work of their serial predator, someone who took underwear as trophies and left them as a calling card. The discovery devastated Reno. Bridget Dennison, Brianna's mother, launched an enormous public awareness campaign. Authorities released composite sketches and vehicle descriptions. The entire community became invested in finding Brianna's abductor. Then on November 1, 2008, nearly 10 months after Brianna's disappearance, police received an anonymous tip through the Secret Witness program. Someone recognized the underwear shown in media coverage. The tipster pointed investigators toward James Beeler's ex-girlfriend. When questioned, she revealed something chilling. While returning from Washington State in September 2008, she'd found unfamiliar women's underwear in James's truck. She confided this discovery to a friend, who later saw the news coverage and connected the pieces. James had fled to Washington State for construction work in March 2008, right after Brianna's body was discovered. In early November 2008, detectives began focusing on James Beeler. He denied everything and refused to provide a DNA sample. He claimed his girlfriend could provide an alibi for his whereabouts when Brianna disappeared. But the girlfriend contradicted his story, telling police he was not with her that night. Without physical evidence directly tying James to the crimes, investigators face a dilemma. Then his ex-girlfriend provided consent for police to collect DNA from their 4-year-old son. The results were decisive. The child's DNA indicated his biological father was the source of genetic material found at multiple crime scenes, on Brianna's remains, on the underwear left with her body, on the door handle of the apartment where she was abducted, and from the December 2007 assault victim. Armed with this evidence, police obtained an arrest warrant for James Beeler and a court order for his DNA. On November 25, 2008, James was arrested while dropping his son off at preschool. The following day, at a press conference, authorities confirmed James's DNA matched sample from all 3 crime scenes, Brianna's case and both prior assaults. He was charged with first-degree murder, first-degree kidnapping, and multiple counts of sexual assault. The trial began in May 2010, attracting intense media coverage. Prosecutor Chris Hicks told jurors that James had compulsion for women's underwear, that he'd escalated from serial predator to someone who ended a life. The December assault victim, whose quick thinking had allowed her to escape and provide descriptions, testified about her ordeal and positively identified James as her attacker. The October victim, who'd initially stayed silent, came forward after Brianna's abduction and also identified James. DNA evidence proved overwhelming, genetic material placing James at all three crime scenes, fibers from Brianna's socks matching James's Toyota Tacoma, cell phone records putting James near Brianna's location at the time of her abduction, and the fact that James promptly left town when Brianna's body was discovered and disposed of his vehicle. James's defense attorneys argued the DNA evidence wasn't conclusive, that each incident had distinct facts undermining the prosecution's theory of a single perpetrator. But they called only one expert witness and rested their case quickly. On May 27, 2010, after 9 hours of deliberation, the jury returned guilty verdicts on all charges: first-degree murder, first-degree kidnapping with use of a deadly weapon, and 2 counts of sexual assault. The penalty phase began immediately. Prosecutors argued James was a continuing threat to society who would offend again if given the opportunity. His defense team presented mitigating factors: an abusive, impoverished childhood in Chicago where his alcoholic father beat his mother regularly, no prior criminal record despite the Marine discharge, productive employment before these crimes, and model behavior in custody. James himself addressed the court, apologizing and expressing regret that he wouldn't see his son grow up. But the jury deliberated approximately 9 hours before unanimously recommending execution. On June 2, 2010, Judge Robert Perry sentenced James Beeler to death by lethal injection for Brianna's murder. On July 30, 2010, Judge Perry added 4 additional life sentences for the assault and kidnapping convictions related to the 2 other victims. Bridget Dennison addressed the courtroom after sentencing. "When James Michael Beeler harmed my little girl, he targeted the wrong family, the wrong women, and the wrong city and state." As James was led from the courtroom, he turned to his mother and apologized, telling her he loved her and not to cry. James has filed multiple appeals. He challenged the DNA evidence, claimed his trial counsel was ineffective, and argued prosecutors shifted the burden of proof during testimony. The Nevada Supreme Court rejected his appeals in 2013 and again in 2019. All legal challenges have failed. James Beeler remains on death row at Ely State Prison in unincorporated White Pine County, Nevada. He is now 43 years old, housed in Nevada's maximum security facility where death row inmates await execution. Nevada has not carried out an execution since 2006, and extensive appeals processes mean James will likely remain in prison for decades before any sentence is carried out. Brianna's murder led to lasting legislative change. In 2013, Nevada Governor Brian Sandoval signed Senate Bill 243 into law, commonly known as Brianna's Law. The legislation requires DNA samples from individuals arrested on felony charges. Supporters argued the law might have saved Brianna's life had it existed earlier, as James had a previous felony arrest that would have placed his DNA in the system. Bridget Dennison founded the Brianna Dennison Justice Foundation, working to implement safety measures and support for victims' families. The case forever changed how Reno approached campus safety and violent predator investigations. Case 5, Darren Mack, Courthouse Sniper. Reno, Nevada, June 12, 2006. A billboard once stood in Reno declaring Darren Mack father, husband of the year. But on June 12, 2006, that carefully constructed image shattered along with a courthouse window, revealing the rage that had been building beneath the surface. Darren Roy Mack appeared to embody the American dream. Born January 31, 1961, he grew up in northern Nevada, learning his family's business from age 7. His mother, Joan, owned Palace Jewelry and Loan, a successful pawn shop operation that would eventually make the Macks prominent fixtures in Reno's business community. Darren excelled at baseball, attended the University of Nevada on scholarship, and after graduation joined the family enterprise. By 2006, he was part owner and had expanded into online sales through eBay. The Macks were wealthy, connected, and respected throughout Reno. But behind closed doors, trouble was brewing. Darren married Charla in 1995. From the beginning, friends described their chemistry as explosive. Charla was vivacious, energetic, someone who lit up every room she entered. They had a daughter together in December 1997, and Darren brought 2 children from a previous marriage into their blended family. That 1998 billboard wasn't just advertising. It was a public declaration of domestic perfection, voted on unanimously by Charla and the 3 children. The Max projected an image of marital bliss that few questioned. But perfection rarely survives scrutiny. On February 7, 2005, Charla filed for divorce when her daughter was just 7 years old. She told a family friend something chilling. "He's out to get me, and someday he will probably kill me." By 2006, the couple had separated and entered what will become one of Reno's most acrimonious divorce proceedings. Money became the central battleground. In August 2005, Darren filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy protection, attempting to shield his assets from division. Family Court Judge Chuck Weller presided over their case, navigating the increasingly hostile negotiations. The couple reached a tentative settlement in January 2006, but Darren attempted to renege on the agreement shortly thereafter. Judge Weller ordered Darren to pay Charla $10,000 monthly in temporary support while the final settlement was negotiated. Darren resented the order. He viewed Judge Weller as corrupt, unfair, someone who had treated him unjustly. On May 24, 2006, Judge Weller affirmed the custody arrangement, granting joint custody of their daughter to both parents. 19 days later, Darren Mack's rage would erupt in devastating violence. June 12, 2006, began as a routine custody exchange. Charla arrived at Darren's Reno townhouse with their daughter for a scheduled visit. A friend of Darren's was present, and the daughter and friend went upstairs to the living area while Darren and Charla went downstairs to the garage. What transpired next would be reconstructed through forensic evidence and Darren's own later statements. According to prosecutors, Darren attacked Charla in the garage, killing her with a knife. The scene was brutal. Investigators found a body in a pool of blood. Darren would later claim self-defense, alleging Charla had threatened him with a weapon, but no firearm was ever recovered to support his account. With Charla deceased in his garage, Darren loaded a high-powered rifle into his vehicle and drove downtown to the Washoe County Courthouse. He parked in a garage across the street, nearly 2 football fields away from the judicial building. Judge Chuck Weller was working in his third-floor office, handling the day's caseload. At approximately 11 a.m., Darren positioned himself with a rifle, aimed through the scope, and fired a single shot. The bullet shattered Judge Weller's office window and struck him in the chest. Glass fragments and bullet pieces caused serious injuries, but Judge Weller survived. Court employees rushed to his aid as Darren vanished from the parking garage. By that afternoon, Reno was in chaos. News spread that a judge had been shot by a sniper. Charla's body was discovered. Police quickly identified Darren as a prime suspect in both incidents. But Darren Mack was already gone, driving south toward Mexico with nearly $40,000 in cash. A massive manhunt commenced. Federal authorities joined local police in tracking Darren's movements. 10 days passed with Darren hiding in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. Finally, through negotiations brokered by telephone with Washoe County District Attorney Richard Gammick, Darren agreed to surrender. On June 22, 2006, Mexican authorities took him into custody. He was extradited to the United States the following day. Darren retained 2 high-profile defense attorneys, David Chesnut from Las Vegas and Scott Freeman from Reno. The legal maneuvering was extensive. Darren's team successfully disqualified the entire Washoe County bench from hearing the case, forcing it to move to Las Vegas at enormous taxpayer expense. They also secured the disqualification of District Attorney Gammick. Visiting Las Vegas District Judge Douglas Horndon was appointed to preside. The trial was set for October 1, 2007. Darren pleaded not guilty to both charges. The defense strategy was unconventional, claimed self-defense for Charla's demise and not guilty by reason of insanity for shooting Judge Weller. Internal defense memos later revealed Darren's concerns about being viewed as a nutcase with a rifle, but he believed the shooting of Weller was justifiable because he considered the judge corrupt. Prosecutors painted a different picture, premeditated retribution against 2 people who stood in Darren's way. They pointed to his flight to Mexico, his methodical planning, and his expert marksmanship as evidence of calculated actions, not insanity or self-defense. Just as the trial was about to begin on November 5, 2007, Darren accepted a plea deal. He pleaded guilty to first-degree murder of Charla and entered an Alford plea, essentially no contest, to attempted murder of Judge Weller. An Alford plea allows a defendant to maintain innocence while acknowledging the prosecution's evidence would likely result in conviction. In exchange, prosecutors recommended life with parole eligibility after 20 years. During the plea hearing, Darren made a remarkable statement. "I do understand right now in my state of mind that shooting at the judiciary is not a proper form of political redress." But Darren wasn't finished fighting. 3 weeks after his plea, he fired his attorneys and hired William Routsis. Darren filed motions to withdraw his guilty pleas, claiming Chesnoff and Freeman had coerced him, that he'd been psychologically manipulated, even that his signature had been forged. Judge Herndon denied every motion. On February 8, 2008, Herndon imposed maximum sentences for murdering Charla, life in prison with parole eligibility after 20 years, for attempting to end Judge Weller's life, 40 years with parole eligibility after 16 years. The sentences would run consecutively, meaning Darren must serve a minimum of 36 years before parole consideration. Judge Herndon noted the heinous nature of Darren's actions when pronouncing sentence. Charla's family delivered emotional victim impact statements. Her friend testified about Charla's vibrant spirit and even played a song Charla had recorded before her passing, a song she'd wanted to sing to Darren. Darren hung his head and appeared to cry, but the judge remained unmoved. At 4 to 6 years old, Darren Mack would be 82 before becoming eligible for parole. The civil consequences were equally devastating. In March 2008, a Washoe County jury awarded $590 million in a wrongful death lawsuit, $560 million to the couple's young daughter, Erica, with a remainder to Charla's estate. Judge Weller filed his own personal injury lawsuit seeking compensatory and punitive damages. Darren has appealed both his criminal conviction and the civil judgments repeatedly. The Nevada Supreme Court denied his appeal in 2010. Federal court rejected his claims. Every legal avenue has closed. Darren Mack currently resides at Lovelock Correctional Center near Lovelock, Nevada, the same facility that once housed O.J. Simpson. He maintains his innocence, claiming he was coerced into his guilty plea. His son, Joey, has publicly defended him, arguing the confrontation with Charla wasn't premeditated. But prosecutors note that Darren rented a vehicle a week before the incident, suggesting planning. The firearm Charla supposedly wielded has never been located. Judge Weller recovered from his injuries and returned to work months after the shooting, though he described the ordeal as a very painful time in his life. The case forced uncomfortable discussions about family court systems, judicial security, and how wealth and privilege sometimes foster entitlement rather than responsibility. Darren Mack had everything: success, family, community standing, yet chose violence when a judge's ruling didn't favor him. His parole eligibility arrives in 2042. Until then, he remains prisoner number 059389, serving time for betraying the father or husband of the year image he once so proudly displayed. Case 6, O.J. Simpson, Las Vegas robbery. Las Vegas, Nevada, September 13, 2007. The white Ford Bronco didn't just carry a fugitive that June afternoon in 1994. It carried the entire nation's attention, glued to their television screens, watching a slow-speed chase that would define an era. But 13 years after that infamous ride, O.J. Simpson would find himself sprinting toward a different kind of reckoning. Oriental James Simpson had already lived 1,000 lives before September 13, 2007. Heisman Trophy winner, NFL Hall of Famer, Hollywood pitchman. Then came the trial that split America, accused of murdering his ex-wife Nicole Brown Simpson and her friend Ron Goldman, only to walk free when a jury declared him not guilty. The criminal case ended, but the civil court told a different story, ordering Simpson to pay $33.5 million to the victims' families. By 2007, Simpson's golden empire had crumbled into legal bills and frozen assets. But none of that prepared anyone for what was about to unfold in a Las Vegas hotel room. It started with a phone call from a memorabilia dealer named Thomas Riccio. He told Simpson that dealers in Las Vegas had items Simpson insisted belonged to him: footballs, photographs, plaques bearing his own name, things Simpson claimed had been taken from him years earlier. Simpson was already heading to Vegas for a wedding, so he decided to retrieve his property. But instead of calling lawyers or police, Simpson assembled a crew of men, some he barely knew. The plan was straightforward: confront the dealers and take everything back. What could possibly go wrong? On that warm September night, Simpson and 5 associates arrived at the Palace Station Hotel and Casino. Their target was room 1203, where dealers Bruce Ramon and Alfred Beardsley had arranged their merchandise. One of the crew, Charles Ehrlich, entered first, posing as potential buyer. Then came the storm. Simpson burst through the door with his entourage behind him. Witnesses later testified that guns were drawn, though Simpson would claim he never saw weapons. His voice commanded the room. Audio recordings captured everything. Simpson directing his crew, items being snatched from beds and tables, dealers sitting frozen, uncertain if this was a robbery or something worse. Within minutes, they had seized boxes of memorabilia and vanished into the Nevada night. But this wasn't some back-alley deal protected by shadows and silence. This was a casino bristling with cameras capturing every angle. Hotel security footage showed Simpson and his crew entering and exiting. The hidden audio recorder Tom Riccio had captured Simpson's voice directing the operation like a quarterback calling plays. Within 72 hours, arrest warrants were issued. The charges were staggering: armed robbery, kidnapping, assault with a deadly weapon, conspiracy to commit a crime, and coercion. Simpson was arrested on September 16th, held without bail, and faced the possibility of spending the rest of his life behind bars. Simpson's defense strategy was simple. He wasn't stealing, he was reclaiming. His attorney, Yale Galantier, hammered this point relentlessly. These were Simpson's possessions, taken from him without permission. No violence occurred. No weapons in Simpson's hands, just a man trying to recover what belonged to him. But prosecutors painted a vastly different picture. They presented this as a premeditated armed invasion, a celebrity who believed himself untouchable orchestrating a violent confrontation with guns drawn and victims terrorized. The evidence was overwhelming. Audio recordings played in open court captured Simpson's commands. Security footage showed the crew's coordinated movements. Former accomplices, cutting deals to save themselves, testified that Simpson knew about the guns, knew about the plan. The trial commenced on September 8, 2008, exactly 1 year after the incident. The jury heard 13 days of testimony. They listened to recordings. They examined photographs. They toured the actual hotel room where it happened. And on October 3, 2008, precisely 13 years, the day after his acquittal in the double homicide case, O.J. Simpson was found guilty on all 12 charges. The courtroom erupted. Simpson, who had been free on bail throughout the trial, was immediately handcuffed and remanded to custody. The man who had once walked away from the trial of the century now faced decades behind bars. Judge Jackie Glass presided over sentencing on December 5, 2008. Known for her no-nonsense approach and harsh penalties, Glass delivered a complex series of consecutive and concurrent sentences that confused even seasoned attorneys. The bottom line: Simpson received a maximum of 33 years in prison, the same number as the millions he owed in the civil judgment, a coincidence noted by everyone, with eligibility for parole after 9 years. Glass emphasized that this wasn't payback for the '94 acquittal, though many wondered. Simpson's co-defendant, Clarence C.J. Stewart, received at least 15 years. The others who cooperated walked away with probation. Simpson entered Lovelock Correctional Center, a medium-security facility in northern Nevada. He served as a model prisoner, stayed out of trouble, worked as a gym attendant, completed programs. When his parole hearing arrived on July 20th, 2017, the nation watched again via livestream. At age 70, Simpson expressed remorse, insisted he only wanted his property back, and received unanimous approval for release. He walked free on October 1st, 2017, having served exactly 9 years. Simpson settled in a Las Vegas gated community, golfed regularly, and posted frequently on social media until cancer claimed him on April 10, 2024, at age 76. The Palace Station robbery accomplished what the murder trial could not. It finally imprisoned O.J. Simpson, not for the accusations that haunted him for decades, but for a botched memorabilia heist that took minutes and cost him 9 years of freedom.